Hey, everybody. It's important to remember that about half of the episodes I make are going to be about current events and the political issues of our time, and the other half are going to be about history, political theory, and more niche content. So here's my upload schedule. The episodes about theory and history are going to come out on Fridays at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, but the episodes about current issues will drop as soon as I'm done making them. This could be on a Friday, a Saturday, a Sunday. Heck, it could even be on a Tuesday night at 1 a.m. when the only people able to catch it hot are my listeners that work night shift. All right, I'm joking. I'm going to try not to do that. The point is, you need to follow me on Spotify, Audible, Amazon Music, and now a pretty new feature, YouTube podcasts. That way you'll get push notifications as soon as the episodes are out. Always remember that my base of operations is on Substack. It's thefogandwhirlwind.substack.com. You'll see occasional blog posts from me there, and also I send out a newsletter too. Thank you. Welcome back to The Fog and the Whirlwind. This is the segment of the show called Friends of the Fog, where I, Josh, your host, sit down with a guest and talk to them about political theory, history, who they are as a person, and their place in the movement that we are in, and talk about really anything under the sun that I want to talk about with them. So, without any further ado, I want to introduce Jason. He is a podcast host on Substack of the Unsung podcast. Make sure you go over there and subscribe, and there will be a link in the description. But it's pretty easy to find. Just go to jasonmcginty.substack.com. That is the best way for you to be able to follow his work, and he joins me now. Jason, I appreciate you taking the time today, and welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So I think that a good place to begin for the listener is talking about the Unsung podcast. So before we even go into some of the purpose for why, is there any particular reason you chose the name Unsung?
It was not a lot of thought went into that title. It's really just, I came up with the title because first of all, the series I'm doing right now is called American Guerrillas, and it's about bleeding Kansas and the Kansas-Missouri border war. Lead up to and during the Civil War, way out west on the frontier. And I guess I kind of came up with Unsung related to that because it's not a part of the war that gets talked about a lot. Everybody wants to talk about Virginia, Gettysburg, all that stuff going on out east with the big armies. But there's a whole other war that's going on in Kansas and Missouri the whole time that is under discussed, I feel like. So that's why I kind of called it Unsung. Yeah.
Okay, I understand. Let's back up a little bit and look at a little bit of you personally, but also Kansas. Did you find yourself, whenever you were a young person, listening to maybe a history teacher or maybe someone on the news and thinking, this part of history is not being told properly or correctly?
I didn't think about that when I was a kid. I did hear about this topic in school. And the way that you kind of hear about, for anybody who doesn't know, bleeding Kansas is what happens between about 1854 and the beginning of the Civil War in 1861. So Kansas was opened up for settlement. And both the North and the South wanted to send their people in there and make it either a free state or a slave state, depending on, where they were from. And kind of the story that gets told about it in Kansas schools is that you had the plucky resistance of the Free Staters resisting the aggression of Missourians who wanted to come in there and, intimidate voters and commit voter fraud and turn the state to a slave state. And I don't ever remember questioning that story as a kid. But yeah, it's like the way it's told in Kansas schools is like a cartoon version of history. It's like, there's a whole lot more to it than that. And so I wanted to dive in and actually figure out what was going on. So that's why I started a podcast about it.
Do you find that a lot of our history that we're taught is almost like a Marvel superhero version?
Yeah, for sure. It's always, we're the good guys, whether it's the Civil War or World War II or whatever, whatever part of history you're talking about. Yeah, it tends to go that way. It's like the regime is the good guys and whoever they're fighting against is the bad guys. And we always characterize them as like evil incarnate,
Very true. I want to talk a little bit about um, just Kansas for a little bit. Let's talk about the war and a little bit more about some of the specifics. So you've done, I think that you just released, is it 9?
Yeah,
Episode
9.
9?
Yep.
As you have dug deep into this history, has there been anything that surprised you?
I wouldn't say it surprises me. The stuff I've learned, I wouldn't say it surprises me now. It would have surprised, little kid me who had, learned about the regime approved narrative. But I was already kind of, on the path to the being a right wing extremist by the time I started this, so it's like, it doesn't surprise me anymore that, schools and institutions lie about history, or maybe not explicitly lie, but tell the narrative that serves them and all that stuff. It doesn't really surprise me anymore. So yeah, I wouldn't say I've learned anything that surprised me a whole lot.
Okay. So when it comes to the war and the way that it was fought, a lot of people, it's funny, it's really both sides of the aisle. To an extent, I will say it's not completely true. There are certain presidents that you just should not ever speak badly about. Like,
Yeah.
even certain Republicans, there are some now who will criticize FDR. And around the time of FDR, sure, there was the America Firster types that criticized him. But even so, like, I've listened to certain people on more like the populist right, I guess, and they even talk about things they admire about FDR. And to criticize him or to say that he was not a good person is a big no-no. And I've found also that when you're dealing with the bigger group of Con Inc. or the establishment Republicans, Lincoln is awesome. I mean, he was just an amazing president. He kept the Union together. And what do you make of this need that people have? And this kind of touches on history as well, that our heroes, this kind of goes back to the whole Marvel universe analogy, our heroes almost have to be worshipped. We have to view them as some amazing big force for good. And if you criticize them at all, then you must somehow prefer the other side. And then we're told, of course, by history that the other side was evil and racist and wanted slavery for a million years or something like that. So, what do you make of this version of history and the certain presidents that is very unpopular to criticize?
Well, I think it's understandable in a way that people don't want to hear their heroes criticized, because I mean, that kind of plays into what I think history is, which is the kind of the collective memory of a people. Like, and if you forget about your history, like, imagine that you woke up tomorrow and suddenly lost your memory of everything that happened before today. Like, that would be super disorienting. Like, you wouldn't know who you were. You wouldn't, like, because your past tells you about who you are now. And if you lose the memory of that, you hear about amnesia cases and how horribly that can turn out sometimes for people and how disorienting it can be. But it's the same kind of thing with history. It's like the story of our past tells us who we are as a people today. And when people wake up to the fact that maybe they've been lied to about that, maybe they've believe things that aren't true, or their heroes are not that heroic, like it can be the same kind of thing. Like, you wake up from like it's kind of scary in a way. And I think people don't want to let go of that stuff. And it's understandable why not.
In the circles you're in, do you find that, and particularly young people, but also people closer to our age, know history, the regime's version of history, a false version of it? Or do you find overall just a lot of apathy?
Um, I don't know. I think it's probably more on the apathy side, to be honest. I don't think people care that much for the most part.
What do you think that does to us? What do you think it does to this country and to the citizens here to not know history and to be apathetic about it?
Well, you don't know who you are as a people because you don't know where you came from. And then you're kind of like, if you don't know who you are, then you're kind of, fertile ground for whoever wants to come in and plant ideas in their head or in your head of who they want you to think you are. So it can be, it's dangerous. But I don't know, like, I mean, how effective is it to like, what are you actually going to do with the knowledge you have if you learn what really happened in the past? I don't know. But I think you lose. I don't know. I'm kind of rambling a little bit, but I think you lose something like it's almost like having amnesia if you don't understand the past.
I think it would certainly, when you look at all these factors of kids having kids, drug use, suicide, and just a lack of purpose, I think if you are looking at this plus this, and you're trying to figure out, well, what's causing all these issues, I think that a disconnect from our history would at least begin to help understand some of the why. I think a lot of it's spiritual. I think you would agree with me on that. But also, like you just said, if you have amnesia politically or historically, you don't know who you are, where you came from, that's going to have an effect on a young person. And it can lead to this person over here, maybe it's a friend saying, well, hey, I've had the same feelings you've had, and pot helps me. And that's a young person telling you that, so you shouldn't take their advice, but you do because a lot of young people are highly impressionable. And then I think also, you probably agree with me on this, it's the dads and the men of the family checking out because maybe they're sad and depressed too. And you said a bit ago, well, I don't know, knowing history, I don't know what it can really do for you right there. But I think that the important thing to look at too could be, well, what do you not do? I mean, maybe because you understand a little bit more about yourself, you understand why you do what you do, and you don't go out looking for the approval of the world or substances and things like that.
Yeah.
I think that, I guess, the let me get your take on something else here. When it comes to the way you said something that I wanted to tap into a minute, you said that when people don't know their history, well, then someone can come along and tell them, well, this is what history is. And that's more or less what I see with, particularly, I think that one of the, what was it called? Was it the 1620 project that came
Oh
along?
yeah, the 1619 project.
I think that's what it was.
Yeah.
Uh, that's an example of what you're talking about to me. But
Well, yeah, and even that though, it's like I think that one was so absurd that even normies didn't buy it. So it was like I think that was more of an example of the left overstepping their political capital almost, because I don't think anybody bought that. Maybe some people did, but I mean, it was just absurd on its face to the point that um, even normies didn't buy it. I think so. But yeah, if people are more subtle about it, then it can be a lot more effective, I think. And you hear a lot about the post World War II consensus these days, and I think that's you know that's kind of it's and you hear about how it's crumbling now, and like people aren't buying it anymore. But I think that's an example of how we've had a couple generations now of people being told that story, and it's become the mainstream narrative, and now people don't want to let go of it because it's what they've always known, and it's disorienting.
So that kind of goes into what you said with the 1619 Project being the most extreme, kind of loud, hey, white people, you're racist, pretty much explicitly.
Yeah.
But that followed generations of being told in a very quiet, more subtle way, hey, America's not that great of a country, white people not so good, things like that. That slowly started being sown into people's minds. And to me, it explains a lot of the problems we see going on right now. But let's look now. We'll topic switch just a little bit and look a little bit more at you. You talked about how by the time you started realizing some of what you were being told was a lie, that you were already, to put it into your words, becoming a radical extremist or a right wing extremist.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about, first of all, okay, before we even go into where you started to go down that path, talk a little bit about where you had been. So, young Jason, was he a normally conservative? Was he when he was very young, but then he became more of like a liberal or a libertarian, or were you basically a conservative up until the point you went further right? Just talk about your journey.
Yeah, I was raised in a conservative household, raised in Kansas, pretty conservative state. And, my parents were Reagan, Bush, McCain, Romney voters, pretty normie, neoconservative types. Um, and I think the furthest left I ever went was in college. I sort of became like an enlightened centrist type, like, oh, both sides are extremism is bad no matter which side you're on, and like we should all just be in the middle on everything. I kind of thought that for a while, and then I think it was really the 2016 election that kind of radicalized me, like many such cases, right? But I actually voted for Gary Johnson in that election because I was kind of libertarian for a while, but and then I voted for Trump the next two times, but yeah, so that was kind of my arc. I was never on the left exactly, except maybe on a few social issues at some points. But yeah, came from conservative background, and I was more of a libertarian than a centrist in the middle there. But yeah, from about 2017, 2018 on, I was coming back to the right.
Do you think any of the reason why you went libertarian, I think this is part of the reason why I did for a little while too, is because you just hated neocons?
I didn't know what a neocon was, to be honest. Um, I don't think I ever really. I think at that point I would have said that, I'm glad Bush got elected over Gore or Kerry, but I don't know. I became more of a libertarian. I think it was more of a personal issue than a political one, because I wanted to, basically I wanted to do what I wanted. And it was kind of that adolescent drive towards not wanting to be told what to do more than anything.
When it came to the social issues that you were a libertarian on, is it that because this kind of ties into religion a little bit, because this is what I would say. I would say, well, on the issue of gay marriage, of course, I believe that homosexuality is still a sin, but I believe the government shouldn't be involved. Or did you ever at any point say, well, is it really a sin though?
Well, I was not a Christian for a while. I was raised Christian, evangelical, Pentecostal type household, and so the drift towards centrism / libertarianism kind of went along with leaving the faith in my early 20s. So that coincided with it a lot. I didn't think I was one of the types who would say, I want the gay married couple next door to be able to defend their weed farm with an AR-15, right?
Which is not a political philosophy, but the absence of one. But
exactly. But yeah, so it coincided with that, and then eventually I converted to Orthodox Christianity in my mid to late 20s, and that went along with the drift back towards the right. So, and I'm fully on board with all that stuff now, like all the things that conservative Christians believe about gay marriage or abortion or fornication or any of that stuff. I'm like, yeah, That stuff is all sinful, and you shouldn't be doing it. And in a rightly ordered society, the government would be outlawing things like, well, I don't know. As far as gay marriage, they'd be outlawing abortion for sure. But like, as far as gay marriage goes, it's like, I think the whole issue there is that people don't actually understand what marriage means. Like it's a sacramental union between a man and a woman. That is the definition. And so to say gay marriage is just it's a contradiction in terms. It's like, so I don't know. I don't think you should even be granting them the term. It's like, should we outlaw gay marriage? Okay, well, that's not a real thing. Like whether you want to like describe it legally or not, it's not a real thing. So that's where we should start the conversation, I think.
I completely agree. I think that the other thing, once you've said that, you have to sort of look at both a naturally ordered, but also I would argue like a Christian values ordered society and say, okay, well, if we recognize that God's way is a good for society and outside of God's way is bad for society, you then realize, I think it flows logically, that if my desire, which it should be, is for my fellow man to be happy and to succeed, but by happiness I don't mean do what thou wilt, I mean actually be happy long term, you understand that there's only a certain amount of freedom that you should have, and also freedom does not always mean, like, for example, freedom for licentiousness. I do believe that, and then this is where I think that the circle gets a little bit hard to square in terms of, okay, we understand that, but where's the role of government in terms of enforcing morality? I mean, people try to say, this is what libertarians love to say, and you know this, oh, well, you can't legislate morality. And I had a history teacher, and I kind of fell away from this, but came back to it over time. He said, well, literally every law, all it does is if you keep the law, you are good. If you break the law, you are bad. So every law, to a degree, legislates morality. The question is, well, how and what morality are we legislating?
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Of course, I think you and I would argue, well, God's morality would be the best, because otherwise it's just complete, basically stack up pancakes. It's just going to fall apart. I mean, or a pile of cards. Yep. So that's interesting to hear that. So you're a former Gary Johnson voter.
Yeah. I laugh about that now because it was kind of cringe.
Well, hey, so I voted for Trump. So I started out as more like a mainstream conservative, started to move to the right, and then became a libertarian. So I voted in 2016 for Trump, but I was starting to become a libertarian. In 2020, I voted for Joe Jorgensen. So at least you voted for Gary Johnson, not Joe Jorgensen. So yeah. I got to give you that. And so I took the L on that one for sure. But anyway, so I voted for Jorgensen. Yeah, I voted for Jorgensen, and then in 24, I voted for Trump, because by that point I had left libertarianism and was moving sort of back where I had started, and which is on the right, but rejecting establishment conservatism. I don't even call myself a conservative anymore. I kind of have a hard time with labels, but I would just kind of say that in ways I'm a reactionary, in ways I'm sort of like a Christian nationalist. It's kind of complicated. But with that being said, you are now, you're starting to move away from your wanting to vote for the Libertarian Party again. It was this more 2018, 2019. When were you starting to leave libertarian or enlightened centrism and moving towards the right again? And what set you on that path?
Yeah, I think it was, I mean, again, many such cases with this, but it was more the left than anything else. It was like, like everybody else, I saw the hysterical reaction to Trump's first election. And it was like, okay, these people are crazy. I want to not be associated with them in any way. And it was
Did you leave the left, or did the left leave you?
Well, I was never on the left.
Right. I'm making a joke. I know you weren't.
Yeah. But yeah, it was kind of that. I think it was just like, you can't live in the real world and see that kind of a reaction to something that was, people were crying fascism and Nazi and whatever else. And it was like, okay, none of this is real. This is the side of the spectrum that's living in a fantasy world. And it wasn't like principled on my part or anything. It was just like, okay, I'm not that, so I guess I'll be the other thing.
Right. So you knew you were against it at the very least.
Yeah.
Do you think there's a world that exists, in just a hypothetical, where if Bruce Jenner did nothing, didn't transition, and if all the transgender crap that came along after hadn't happened in, I want to say it was 2014 or 15, that the chances of you staying with libertarianism might have gone up?
Maybe, I don't know. It's hard to say. Because
Yeah.
the other thing is, I converted to Orthodoxy, and I was baptized at the end of 2023, or sorry,
Okay.
2022.
Okay.
And then, I was kind of inquiring and being catechized for a year or two before that. And it was like, that was really like, I think politics flows out of, to quote our everybody's favorite Zionist, politics is downstream from religion. And I think that's actually true, more so than even culture. Like religious beliefs inform politics. And, you can't be a Christian and think that anything on the left is healthy. So it's like, once I went down that road, it's like, okay, well, it's not that Christianity is right wing exactly. It's really not part of the political spectrum. But if you are a Christian, I think you'll end up being right wing if you're doing it properly.
I asked that because of the fact that I think for a lot of people, you mentioned for you, it was more the reaction to Trump getting elected that started you, and then you continued down that path. For a lot of people, I think it was the transgender stuff.
Yeah, well, that was part of it for sure.
Sure. Because a lot of people, when Bruce Jenner, who had been an actor and in movies and TV shows, and then this swimmer, was like, "Hey, I'm a woman. I'm going to put on a dress and get a surgery." A lot of people said, "Okay, we're going to just affirm that delusion," and then those of us that did not said, "Well, that's not good," and we reject that. And I think over time, people went one of two directions. They said, which was kind of what I did at the time. I said, "Well, your body, you take care of it. You're an adult. That's your business." Or you affirmed it in another direction. So maybe there was three responses. Or you rejected it and said, "This is really bad for society. Not only is this a person doing this, but it's also a celebrity. It's going to encourage other people." And also the way that the media applauded it and said, "Well done, you're beautiful and brave," was also just very off-putting to, I think, a lot of people that wouldn't have gone the direction they were going. I mean, you and I probably would have gone the direction we went regardless. Yeah. But other people probably, without all of that, would have stayed about where they were.
Yeah, and that's like a libertarian delusion to think that, what you do in your personal life is your business and doesn't affect anybody else. It's like, yeah, of course it does. We live in relation to other people, and what you do affects the people around you, affects your neighborhood, your town, your state, wherever you're at. Like, nothing is only about you. And it's kind of like, I don't know, libertarians like to say that as a mantra almost. And it's just a delusion.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. And I want to come back to that because I think that's a interesting thing we could look at with just kind of the American conservatism. So this is sort of where you were moving rightward. And at some point, maybe it was pretty early on, maybe you were still being catechized, whatever it was. I was messaging you on Telegram. We were talking, and somehow or another it came up that you are a monarchist. So you would prefer for America, if I understand correctly, to have a king. I wanted to talk to you about first, what time in your being red-pilled, as it were, did you start realizing that you believed this way, or did you not believe this way, but then someone made an argument you just couldn't refute, maybe a book or a podcast or speech? Just talk a little bit about how you came to that conclusion.
Well, that goes along with Christianity. And I think, I'll say, like, well, first of all, I'll say that I guess I'm a monarchist in the sense that I think monarchy is the ideal form of government. As far as practical stuff for America, that's probably not ever going to happen in several lifetimes from now. But the other thing is that even though, like, you can talk about ideals, and you also have to talk about what's best for a particular people right now under the current circumstances. And it's like, I can think that monarchy is the ideal form of government in the abstract. And I think that's true because, that goes along with Christianity. It's like Christ is not a president, he's a king, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the best thing for America right now is to have a king. So it's like, but that's because there's principles and then there's application. And this is where you need people who are spiritually advanced to guide you. And that, that goes for your personal life and for at the political scale too. But so I think, like, for America, it's like I don't think we're in a state spiritually where we could even contemplate something like a monarchy in America. But that's a problem with us and not a problem with monarchy, in my opinion. So I would never I would never say that I know what's best for America right now, but that's kind of like, there's the point is there's a difference between principles and application is always situation dependent. So it's always complicated in the real world.
I understand. So went along with Christianity, if I'm understanding correctly, what do you think specifically part of your Christian faith moved you that direction instead of merely being someone who said, because there's plenty of people on the right who say they want, in their form of an ideal, let's be specific. I know that you would probably be content with a Senate, a House, and a presidency that did the right thing, that legislated correctly at a well-ordered society that honored the Lord. You'd be happy with that.
That'd be a move in the right direction. Yeah.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. You would take that over what we have now, which is basically a bunch of politicians who say, Epstein files, what Epstein files, things like that.
Yeah. I'd be satisfied with elites that don't systematically abuse children.
Right.
Let's start with that.
Yeah.
Pretty low bar.
Yeah, it is. It is. But so I guess what I'm asking is, there are people though who would say, well, the founders set up America to have a president and a Congress and to have a representative republic or a representative democracy for those who are a little bit more blue-pilled, I guess. So that being said, why do you think you are not there when it comes to, again, the ideal? Why would you say, I'd take it right now, but that's not my final goal. Where if you were steering the ship, yours would be with a monarch. And I guess also, because I think all Christians would and should recognize Christ as King, why do you see the natural relationship? So it's kind of two questions, I guess. Why do you see the natural relationship between Christianity and monarchy? And secondly, why do you go all the way to monarchy instead of merely a righteous Congress and righteous president?
Well, I think institutions on earth, like marriage, government, anything like this, in their ideal form, they're a reflection of things in heaven. And, so like the ideal form of anything on earth should be as close a reflection of heaven as possible. And it's like, well, that's when it comes to government, that's not going to be a democracy. But even besides that, it's like, if you read ancient philosophy, like Plato and Aristotle both thought that democracy was the most degenerate form of government you could have. And they make good arguments for that. And so, that's part of what brought me around to that too, is reading those guys. Because they make a compelling case for it. And you can go read it yourself and tell me I'm wrong, but I don't think you'll be able to. But yeah, like when people say that, well, we should just go back to what the founders intended for America. It's like, okay, well, why is that the end all be all of what's good? It's like, you think that theirs was the best system that anybody's ever come up with? I mean, it got us here. So I don't think that's quite true. And you can call it a perversion if you want of the original intent, but it's like, even if it is a perversion, like it allowed for that, like through the actions of people within the system. And so I don't know. I'm sorry. I forgot what your question is. Am I still kind of on topic? Or?
Yeah, you are. You started out by answering it very directly regarding the relationship between monarchy and Christianity, and then I asked you regarding why some people would say, well, I'm a Christian, but I want a president and a Senate and a House, and you're explaining why for you wouldn't be content with a Senate, House, and president that know the Lord and serve him. You would prefer that to what we have now, but ideally you would go further, and you were articulating some of the reasons why.
Well, yeah. And yes, so I think, I think the right especially has to get away from the idea that, well, we just need to go back to what the founders intended, and then everything will be good. It's like, well, that's kind of up for interpretation anyway, because, you had a multiplicity of founders who all thought different things about different things. And so it's kind of hard to even say what the founders' intent overall was. But even if you could come up with a definite vision of what that was, and maybe you can, but even if you could, why is that the ideal? Like, why? I don't think people can answer that. I think it's more of an article of faith for conservatives.
I think that the argument would be because they're the ones who not only made and set up the government, but made the country itself. And then you have to get into some complicated parts of political theory that I got to tell you, I don't have all the answers. I haven't made every conclusion because I haven't looked into it completely, but there are very interesting counter arguments on the part of like King George III, because you have to wonder now, look, the problem is some people will say, well, if we had not had the 1775 or 76 revolt against the king, we would currently be under King Charles III right now, and that we would basically be just as degenerate or invaded by the Muslims as they are. But the problem with that is, well, we're not being invaded by Muslims to the same degree they are, but we're being invaded somewhere else. It's a country geographically south of us.
Yeah.
So, but in terms of the natural ordering of society, there's like, I don't know. Are you familiar at all with Mencius Moldbug?
Yeah, I've never read any of his stuff directly, but I hear him talked about a lot.
Yeah, he talks about the American founding. He has some interesting things that are worth listening to. I don't agree with everything he says, and it's not just about the American Revolution, but also other things that he says. But he's worth listening to, I think. But in terms of, so I think you've explained that part of it pretty well. I wanted to, because you've hit on this just a couple of times, and I thought this was interesting, because we mentioned individualism, and you mentioned the sort of like more mainstream conservatives and the way they view the founding. In your view, do you think that there's a sort of odd alliance within conservatism with classical liberalism?
I think conservatives think that classical liberalism is on their side.
Right.
But I don't think it is in reality.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I think that that's sort of where you go into, and I don't know how you feel about this, maybe you disagree, but there are certain people in the Republican Party who pretty much just not quite worship money, but they only care about the free market, and libertarians are like this too. And they don't care if that means, well, what about John down the road who just lost his job because it got sent overseas? And they're like, well, forget that. That's the invisible hand of Adam Smith, bro. You just have to kind of accept that.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, there's certain people who don't want to accept that. We think that John should be able to work and provide for his family. But see, classical liberalism, and for that reason, I would say U.S. conservatives, a lot of them anyway, have to say, well, no, I mean, you'd have to deregulate harder. That's the way forward for prosperity. So, and then a lot of people will say that the American founders were classical liberals, and I don't know if you view that way.
I haven't read enough of them to really know exactly what they all would have thought about classical liberalism, but I do think that classical liberalism is an Enlightenment ideology, and that's already a problem as far as I'm concerned. It's like that's kind of the era when you get secularism coming, rising up. The French Revolution is all tied in with that. But it's already like, it's a problem from the start. It's like classical liberalism might just be, we always say conservatism is liberalism going the speed limit. It's kind of the same thing with classical liberalism, I think.
What do you make of the idea that people on the right should be individualists?
I would ask them what they mean by individualist exactly, and I would say that there's like we talk about the royal path in Orthodoxy, where it's not like a centrist thing, but it's like there's two extreme. It's like a more of an Aristotelian mean kind of thing almost. Like if you've read about that, but it's like there's an excess and a deficiency, and there's a mean that is the ideal. And if you talk about collectivism versus individualism, it's like, you have the obvious examples like communism, where collectivism goes too far, and then but then there's also examples where individualism goes too far, and I think that's where we've got to now. It's like we're not atomized individuals. It's like we were talking about earlier with the things you do in your personal life matter for the people around you, and for your city and your country and your state and everything, your society. So it's like you're not an atomized individual, and if we try to pretend that we are, and that our decisions are truly our own business and nobody else's, then things fall apart.
How would it be if we all said to our own families or to each other as fellow Americans, especially founding stock, you're your own person. So if you're homeless, or you lost your job, or your barn is on fire, that's your problem and I refuse to help you. That doesn't sound that good. That doesn't sound like a kind of country I want to live in. That also doesn't sound like what Christ taught. I mean, that sounds a lot like the Pharisee and the priest walking by the Samaritan on the other side. And I think that in a way, that's sort of a look at individualism/liberalism versus being more of like a communitarian, someone who believes in taking care of each other, not in a way like you said. I appreciate how you framed it, where there's an excess of too much collectivism, where it's tyranny, the collective ordering individuals, well, you've got to do this, we command you, and if not, it's the death penalty. Or the excesses of individualism, which is more like my body, my choice, even though, well, there's a life within you. And it's also bad for society, because if you do kill your child and we just normalize that, that's going to be more people dying, right?
Yeah, I don't know how true this is, but I saw a stat the other day from somewhere. I don't even remember where. This might be totally made up, but it said that I think like 23% of Generation Z has been aborted.
I saw that.
That's insane. Like,
well,
you think your body, your choice doesn't affect society around you, and 23% of a generation is getting aborted? That's insane.
It really does show that the rhetoric people employ and use does have real world consequences.
Yeah.
And this idea put into people's brains around the time of abortion becoming more mainstream of, well, here are the arguments we're going to use against the religious right-wingers. Things like, well, it's just a clump of cells. That's a buzzword. That's not a theory on science. That's a buzzword that people use. It sounds like propaganda, and it is propaganda. That were put into people's heads. Really, I think a lot of it points back to probably the classroom.
Well, it also flows naturally out of secular materialism,
Yes.
though. And it's like we were talking about earlier about how politics is downstream from religion. If you get to a point where your society is not religious anymore, you don't believe in a soul, you don't believe in anything immaterial, then yeah, it is just a clump of cells on materialism.
Well,
And
we all
so
are.
and so are you, by the way.
Right. We all
So
are.
yeah, you and our suffering, our happiness, any of that stuff doesn't matter. Like our rights, like none of this. That's the real like trap that we've set for ourselves. Is that by that same logic, nothing matters, and we might as well just do whatever we want. So and then the left especially will argue that, well, you can't violate people's rights. You can't. It's about harm. Like you can do whatever you want as long as you don't harm somebody. It's like, okay, well, on that same argument about abortion, you're just harming a clump of cells, bro. Why does it really matter? It doesn't for them.
Because anger is just a bunch of our neurons firing.
Yep.
Love is just a bunch of weird chemical reactions in the brain. And when someone dies, they blink out of existence. Like you just said, they don't believe in the soul, anything like that. So I think that's where a lot of natural conclusions come from about hopelessness, or young people feel lost. And part of that also is just hyper individualism, not feeling like they belong anywhere. And that kind of goes to the history, but also the breakdown of the family of not feeling like they belong. And as a result, they're kind of atomized individuals that don't feel like they matter. Well, to this worldview of apathy and nihilism, yeah, you don't matter. The good news is that there's another point of view, and it's starting to grow, I think, like a snowball rolling down a hill. Also, as far as the stat you cited a bit ago, I want to remind you that George Washington said that all facts on the internet are accurate. So I can guarantee you personally that was true. So I read that quote somewhere. So real quick, this was
on the internet.
Right, exactly. It's like the one ad where the two people are going back and forth about, where did you read that? Well, it's on the internet. Real quick, so I think it's easy, but we'll tackle something I think a little bit easier and a little bit harder. What would you say in maybe 1 to 2 minutes are your problems with democracy? So we'll start there.
First of all, it's a delusion to some extent, because the lie is that the people are governing. Well, that's never true in reality. Like you always have an elite that is directing things. Like that, and I'm not super well versed in the elite political theory or anything like that, but even practically speaking, it's like, okay, well, in a place like, even on the scale of like a moderately sized American city with 100,000 people in it, it's like, do you really think 100,000 people can come together and decide anything? That's a total delusion. And so then you get into conversations about like elected representatives and how they're representing the will of the people. But but then that just becomes another elite that's making decisions that may or may not have anything to do with the will of the people. So it's a lie from the start. And then you also have the problem of the ideal it's expressing is the flattening of hierarchy. Because like we're saying we're going to make everybody equal. Well, people are not equal in their abilities, in their skills, in their ideal roles. Like people should not all be the same and should not all have the same authority. Like this is not how that's not how the real world works. So so that's another way that it's a lie. It's like, okay, we're going to make everybody equal. Everybody has an equal voice. It's like, well, that's now you're giving, the same vote to, I don't know, 19-year-old college girls who have never read a book. You're giving the same vote to that person that you're giving to the person well-versed in political theory. Like, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, universal suffrage. There are so many things wrong with it. But also, though, so that to me, and it went from, as far as I'm concerned, your mouth to God's ears. I completely agree with it. Where I'm not saying you would lose me, but I think that I'd like to hear your argument for why I might come to the same conclusion. So people, a lot of them are going to say, okay, understand that, Jason. What would your problem be with a constitutional republic? Do you view in many ways the same? You think a republic rather than a monarchy, republic still has the lie of all people completely being equal or the same, or do you have other problems with republics specifically than you do with democracy?
Well, it's almost just like democracy with extra steps. It seems to me. It's like, well, we're going to elect representatives and they're going to make decisions for us. But still, you're saying you have the same problem with universal suffrage. And then I don't know, maybe it's better in some ways. I'm not going to say I'm an expert in all of this theory or anything, but I don't know. It might be better nominally. Like, I don't know. I'm not sure.
Okay, I understand. Well, that was good. Let's talk a little bit about. You mentioned the elites, and I know you said just a second ago you're not an expert on like elite theory, but I know at one point I was talking to you about in terms of how do we get closer to your ideal, and you basically said all you want to do is sort of educate your circle, but the elites are going to be the basically, we'll just use this term, the king makers in the long term. Do you see? I guess my question is, with the elites, is part of what you do so that one day an elite might be on Substack and find the Unsung podcast and they get into power and start doing some things to defend our values? Or what do you see as the role of elites versus the role of more like the common layperson?
Well, I don't delude myself about that, really. I don't, I'm not an elite. I'm never going to be an elite. I don't think it's my job to try to affect political change on a national level. Like, that's never going to be my role. But like, my podcast first and foremost is because I wanted to research this topic and tell my friends about it. So it's like, and if it catches on and people listen to it, then I hope people will understand that part of history better from an angle they haven't heard it before. But I don't have any intention of affecting political change on a national scale or anything like that. And I think on some level, anything that I say about national politics is a little bit of a LARP, because it's like, again, I'm not an elite. I'm not a decision maker for anything like that. So nobody really cares what I think except for the people that I live around. So I keep my focus small and on the level of me and my family and my community and the people I know.
When it comes to, you mentioned earlier, being raised by people who were, I think you said first Reagan, then Bush, then McCain and Romney supporters. How do you see the right moving? Do you think that, and again, this is just your perception, I'm not saying that you have the solution for making more people move further right. I'm asking, though, what do you see? Do you see a lot of young people and even people more our age changing their minds from being just sort of a basic Daily Wire listening conservative, or maybe Turning Point USA to something a little more radical? What are you seeing? And then secondly, so once you've described what you see, the why.
Well, I see, I see the same thing as other people have seen in the, especially when it comes to the post World War II narrative falling apart. I see that going on. Um, More importantly, I think, people are waking up to the fact that secular materialism is bankrupt. And I think that's more important than any political change or a change in political opinions among lay people. It's like, what people really need to do is get a spiritual life, like convert to Christianity and go to church. Like that's what you should be doing. And it's happening a lot. Like we see in our parish, we see people coming all the time. Like we have like I don't even know how many catechumens right now, in the process of converting. And it's like people are looking for spiritual significance in their life. And they've been taught that there is no such thing by the culture. And I think they're waking up to the fact that that's no way to live life.
Well, that's good. I think that people are moving to the right because they realize that the aforementioned classical liberalism driving the speed limit has no roots in anything that really holds or has logical consistency.
Yeah.
They're realizing, I think part of it, I think actually, so this is a really bad thing that happened, but I do think that some of the reaction was a good thing, is twofold, really. Number one, the invasion of Ukraine, because what happened, Mark Levin at the time, but especially people like Sean Hannity and Ben Shapiro, started sounding exactly like Rachel Maddow. And people started to realize, well, wait a second, but you've been a conservative on this issue, you say, and this issue, and this issue. But now when it comes to war, you sound exactly like the people you say you oppose. And then whenever someone, and again, you don't have to like the guy, but Tucker Carlson opposes that or asks questions about it, he is called Putin's puppet. People are starting to realize, well, no, that guy, he doesn't sound like Putin's puppet. He sounds like someone who genuinely cares about this country and putting it first. And I guess that's sort of what I was asking about. I think that things like that happening in the world and seeing the response to it, when someone responds the right way and other people see it, they will then follow, which is hopefully what you and I can do in terms of what you should be doing to encourage people is encourage people to ask questions, to pick up a book, to read, to learn about your history and take it seriously, and to find people who cover history and look at it carefully. And same for what I try to do with my talking about history, political theory, and especially day-to-day politics of people being lied to, basically. And so that's what I'm hoping is happening. I think that's the trendsetter. The second thing that happened was the whole October 7th thing. And again, a lot of the Democrat Party and the mainstream Republican Party coming together and saying, well, we're going to be sending billions of dollars in aid and all that good stuff. So
yeah,
hopefully I have faith that, hearing what you've been saying about this generation turning to the Lord, I hope it continues to happen, because I think you would join me in saying a lot of the stuff going on as far as like political fighting or infighting or just left versus right, even if it's the real right versus the real left, not the fake centrist stuff, it's not really going to make much change if people aren't turning to the Lord. And hopefully that's something you and I can both do as lights in their lives. Do you generally agree that, it sounds like you do, that local political action is more important than national?
Well, as far as your individual life goes, yeah, probably. And I think, it's kind of like, I think another lie of the modern secular age and another lie of democracy is that people have been taught that you have an important voice in national politics, and it's like, okay, but you probably don't really.
I
You
saw an
know,
amazing video where it
that's
was two candidates, Republican, Democrat, arguing, and at the end it's this like generic sounding female voice. And remember, your vote counts. And then it goes offer not available, and it starts listing all the 50 states.
yeah.
It's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's like so people get like it's another effect of democracy is where people get the idea that and this is where you see like all these protest movements happening too, especially on the left. Um, hands off our rights and my voice matters and all this stuff. It's like, well, but you're really just kind of a cog in the machine. And I think it's unhealthy for people to focus on that too much because of how little your voice actually matters. Like the elites are going to do what the elites do, and you probably can't affect it at all if you're a regular person. And so your focus ought to be on the local level, like your family, your community, the people around you. Like that's where you can actually make a difference in real people's lives instead of focusing on all this abstract political stuff that you can't really affect.
How much of it do you think? I mean, you're a little older than me, so you probably remember at least some of the whole Tea Party thing that happened against Obama. That was a lot of fire and passion that didn't really get a whole lot done.
Yeah.
And even to a degree with the Trump movement, there's a little bit of that. It's gotten some things done. I mean, having Trump in there, he's at least deporting some people. That's better than the alternative. But it's a lot of it is talk, a lot of it is tweets, a lot of it is true social posts, which is entertaining and fun and, again, better than the alternative. But in terms of the future, well, okay, the next Democrat that gets in is just going to reverse everything and throw the gates back open.
Yeah.
Maybe some of what you're saying is you and I should be working on building something that's not going to go away, in the turn of an election cycle. It's going to actually last longer and, number one, be built, as far or connected to the kingdom of God, but also last longer for our children, our children's children, things like that, and leave people in the future better off instead of just focusing on something that's so fading, so quick to go away. So.
Yeah, and how many examples have you heard of where leftists are, they'll say all this stuff about how they want to protect people's rights and prevent harm, and it's all this abstract stuff, and then they treat the actual people around them like absolute dirt. Like it's a way for people to delude themselves into thinking they're doing good when actually they're acting like degenerates.
Sinful people in need of a savior, and there's people who don't understand Christianity and don't understand the Creator who are like, well, how could humans ever act this way? Well, I hate to break to you, there's a book called the Bible that actually gives some very good answers as to why, because of the sinful nature we have and our need for a savior. Let's get ready to wrap this up. This has been excellent, by the way. I'd love to have you back on at some point.
Yeah.
I'd love other to. Than you said off air that Instagram is all well and good for people to be following, but mainly what you put there is pointing people to the site, which is on Substack, jasonmcginty.substack.com. And I would encourage people to go there for sure. And I will say, you will learn a lot. Part one so far, is part one still the longest?
No, part 4 is the longest.
Okay.
So part 4 is over 8 hours long. I got a little carried away on that one.
Well, I think some of the struggle for you is you don't want to gloss over things that kind of need to be addressed more and more depth.
Yeah, well, the whole point of it of this is to dive into the details. So like I don't want to leave out details.
Right.
Like I want to talk about every important figure and their backstories and the nitty-gritty. I don't want to like tell you my idea of what happened in the broad strokes. I want to actually tell the story. So yeah, I think it's up to, there's 9 episodes and I think it's up to like, I don't know. I'd have to do the math, but it's over 35 hours at this point. I'm pretty sure in total.
You may not be able to say this. Where are you seeing this going? Are you wanting to go for another 9 episodes? You just dropped 9. Do you think 20 is a good even number? Do you think 50 is a good even number? Or is it more of a well, I'll know when I feel it. I'll know that when I set down the microphone, okay, I think I've said everything that I can.
Yeah.
Are you waiting for that moment, or what do you think?
Well, this series is I just have a story in mind that I want to tell. Like I have a time period I want to cover and certain events and people that I want to cover. And when I'm done with that, the series will be over. And then I'll be on to a different topic, a different series that I'll do the same thing with. So, but for this current one, I'm hoping to have it wrapped up in 2 more episodes. So it'll be 11
Okay.
total. I didn't go in with an idea with like a definite idea of how many episodes it would be, but it's turning out that it's going to be 11. But maybe it'll be 20. I don't know.
Okay. Well, I genuinely wish you all the best on that. And once I'm caught up, I'm not caught up on it. I will look forward to the next series you'll be working on. And I think that part of the reason why it's so many hours too is you are punching back, you are counteracting. Heck, it's got to be at least 100, probably almost 150 years of the opposite, right? You have people not being told the truth, people not knowing the full context, and to undo that in a 2-hour episode is just not going to happen.
Yeah.
That's not possible.
Well,
That's not achievable.
and the
Or
thing is,
fair.
like, I could tell you, I could probably spend 2 hours and tell you what I think
Right.
about how the regime narrative has lied to people, but nobody's going to understand that on a deep level unless they actually hear the story, So I
Right.
think that the details are important, and then it stops being so much just my opinion from everything I read. It's like, okay, here's what happened. Like you can draw your own conclusions from it. I'm definitely telling it from a particular viewpoint. Like I don't pretend to be objective or anything like that. But yeah, it's that's why I want to spend as much time on it as I do.
Okay. Well, I really appreciate you coming on. This has been awesome.
Yeah, thanks for
And
having me.
yes, of course. And we will hope to see you again soon. God bless.
Thanks.
Thank you for watching and listening to this episode of The Fog and the Whirlwind. I appreciate it a lot. Please follow me if you haven't already and leave me a comment on Spotify, YouTube, and Substack. If it's interesting, wise, funny, or weird enough, I just might read it in the next episode. Also, if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you press the like button, or if you're watching clips of it on Rumble, press the like button there as well. It helps it out in the algorithm. Thank you. Also, if you're about to argue with your liberal coworker about some silly thing he read on Instagram, and you remember something I said on my show, but you're sitting there with your heart in your mouth because you can't remember the source I used, don't worry, man. I post all my sources on Substack. So go to thefogandthewhirlwind.substack.com/subscribe. You can also become a paid supporter and help me achieve my dream of doing this full time by supporting me monthly or yearly. One more thing. Remember to follow me on social media. I've got links in the description. That's it. See you in the next episode. Thank you very much.